you watch. Now, Emma, you've been taking a look at some of the latest words and images, and shocking they are, coming from inside Eastern Ghouta in Syria.
Yes, Eastern Ghouta, of course, now back in the hands of the Syrian regime after years as a rebel stronghold. And it really has been the focus of the conflict for the last few months. This image, though, really brings home the new challenge facing those who have had to flee the region, forced from their homes. This was published by UNICEF on Twitter. I don't know how old this child is or where they are attempting to head to, but it really does show how desperate that journey is going to be for so many people. 700,000 people in Syria have been internally displaced just since the start of this year. So huge, huge numbers of people looking for somewhere else to live, many of them heading for the encampments described by some as basically a prison for those who are against the Assad regime. This person saying it took them 48 hours to reach where they will be staying, this camp for the internally displaced. Not a new home, of course, and they still have to work out a way to build a new life for themselves. Some have found a way to make the best of things and have been a little more fortunate, including Noor and Ala. I spoke to you about them back in February. An 8 and 10-year-old girl who tweeted about their life in Eastern Ghouta, earning themselves thousands of followers on Twitter. They've built a new life. They've moved to Turkey. This is them with a small boy called Karim, who lost an eye in the fighting in Syria. So they are one of the lucky ones who've been able to get out of Eastern Ghouta and find somewhere that is more like home to live. Another interesting thing to look at, another interesting account of leaving Eastern Ghouta and Douma in particular, is Abdel Monem Essa, who is a photographer for Agence France Presse. Very strong images, very strong words too in his piece. Don't look at it if you don't have much of a stomach for this kind of thing, because it's pretty heartrending. He talks about, in a particularly emotive way, which is unusual when it comes to journalism, but he talks about the fact that the Syrian regime and Russian warplanes are sparing no one and nothing, no mother, child, home, mosque or school. Now, he talks so emotively because it is his home. He was born in that region. He's now in the Hama province and says that everything here looks great compared to the death back in Ghouta.
Absolutely shocking, disturbing things, and the sight of that little baby with an eye missing with the two little girls, it's just heartbreaking, isn't it? Let's move on. Cannes and controversy, two things that seem to go very much hand in hand. This time the French Film Festival has upset Netflix. Tell us why.
Yes, they certainly have, and Netflix has fought back, and this really goes to the heart of snobbery in French cinema, I think it's fair to say. That basically Cannes Film Festival will not allow any movie that didn't have a proper in-theatre release here in France to enter competitions in Cannes. So Netflix, because of course they screen immediately on their streaming services, have decided to pull out altogether. If they don't get any prizes, they're not going to play. That's their theory on this one. Their movies could still be shown at Cannes, but out of competition. But they've said no, they don't want to play a part in it. Now, this is all down to, as you might expect in France, French cinema owners and unions protesting last year. Because last year there were a couple of movies from Netflix that were shown in competition, including this one, Okja. And there was a big hoo-ha about it because in France there is a law which means that you cannot put on a film in a cinema and then have it on television within 36 months. I never knew there was such a law, but there you go. Now, Thierry Frémaux, who is the artistic director of the Cannes Film Festival, doesn't seem to be all that bothered about Netflix saying they're not going to show their movies. He has said, contrary to appearances, there has been constructive dialogue between himself and Netflix. He says Netflix remains welcome in Cannes. He also points out that although people are talking about this being a new rule, it's actually decades old. It's just that it's never mattered before now. 2017 was the first time that they had movies in competition that hadn't been shown on the big screen. Now, one of the saddest things about this, and one of the biggest impacts, I think it's fair to say, is one of the 5 films that Netflix has chosen not to show is the last work of Orson Welles, the late, great Orson Welles. His daughter has actually written to Netflix asking them to reconsider because it was due to premiere at Cannes, which would have been a great thing for her.
It would have been fitting, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, a fitting end to an amazing career. It's called The Other Side of the Wind. She's desperately hoping that Netflix will think twice and actually show this movie at Cannes, even if it's not up for any awards. Interesting reactions to this online. IndieWire saying that Cannes used to be the envy of the film world. Now, with Netflix pulling out of the festival, it looks hopelessly out of date. And this piece in Slate is very interesting, saying it's hard to root for anyone because this writer talks about Netflix being petty, basically taking its ball and going home, while it accuses Cannes, the film festival, of being high-handed. It says the manner in which Fremo handed down the Cannes ban at the same time as the festival also issued a formal ban on taking selfies on the red carpet. He says that it was high-handed and doctrinaire. In other words, it was French.
Emma James, thank you very much indeed. Selfies will never be banned in this studio. We haven't done any yet, but who knows? And Slate got it right, I think. Both sides perhaps to blame. But once upon a time, when something wasn't shown in a cinema, it's because it was rubbish. Now, of course, it's changed, hasn't it, with the advent of Netflix and different formats. So maybe Cannes needs to update it.